Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Mind Muscle Connection podcast. Today is a Q&A episode, and I have three questions I want to dive into. So let's get into those. So best way to implement strategic refeed days in a deficit. So again, if you aren't familiar, what is a refeed day? Basically, these are days within a deficit where you go to around your maintenance calories, right? We're increasing our calories back to around maintenance, right? And again, there are some benefits to potentially doing this, right? It's like, all right, why would I add in a day where I go back to maintenance? Fat loss dieting is tough physically and mentally, right? And there's also the added pressure of trying to hit low calories day in and day out, and that can add up, right? So there's just a lot of physical and mental stress and pressure around trying to fat loss diet, even though it's something that we specifically seek out and want to do. I see it a lot of times where people have one meal off or maybe quote unquote one bad day, and people just give up or just spin their wheels, right? And so this is where we can implement something like a refeed day and even a potentially a diet break, right? With this. So again, these are things that we can add in here, there, right? And again, it's important to actually how I'll take this is I'll go through how we can implement it, and then I'll talk about some things you need to know about refeeds. So again, the first thing we want to do is we want to get to maintenance calories. So you should have a good idea of where that's at heading into this. If you don't know where your maintenance calories are at, to me, that's a sign that you need to work on that before you even go into a deficit. So again, we want to get to our maintenance calories, and usually maintenance calories are somewhat of a range, right? It's not this exact number. So you want to figure out where exactly that kind of sweet spot is. If you want to be on the safe side and make sure you're not overshooting it, maybe you go on the lower end of your maintenance. If you want to try to get everything out of it, and you're okay with a little bit of flexibility, and maybe you're on the higher end of your maintenance, then you can go to the higher end of your maintenance. I think the big takeaway is calorie tracking isn't a perfect science anyway. So just as long as you fall within that range, your maintenance, that's going to be important. We want to keep protein the same. You can add protein if you want, but at the very minimum, we want to keep it the same versus dropping it. You can add in more if you like it and you want to eat, and you want that to be a way that you potentially stay more full and make sure maybe your food doesn't get too out of whack on that day. But we ideally would want to add via carbs or fats in this situation, adding whatever you think, whatever you enjoy, and maybe whatever your body does well with. I would say most of the time it's going to be via carbs because that's a great way to help with recovery. And it can be a great way to help get you ready for training in the next couple days or that day. I think the leaner you are, the more helpful the carbs will be. The more body fat that you have when you're fat loss dieting and you decide to use a refeed day, the more flexibility you have there between carbs and fats with that. Again, we still want to make sure we have a good base of typical nutrient dense / quote unquote diet foods, right? So you don't want to necessarily change up how you're going about your diet. You're just adding in more of those types of foods. Maybe you're adding in a little bit of tasty food, but the majority of your nutrition for the day, we want to be from those types of foods. We want to use them when you feel motivation slip or you have some fatigue from dieting. So you can do it where you're proactive, where it's, hey, you have it planned at certain times, or you can be more reactive to it. It's ultimately up to you and what you think is best for you. But when we're reactive, we probably don't want to be so reactive in the sense that you're just like, oh, hey, you know what? Today I feel like eating more calories. It probably needs to be like, okay, hey, I'm starting to feel this tomorrow and Wednesday, I'm going to eat at my maintenance calories. Or you can be more proactive with it where it's like, hey, I'm going to do this every couple weeks, or I'm going to do it once a week there. Again, there's no right or wrong. I would say with the proactive approach where you're planning ahead, the only downside is you may not necessarily need it or you may not do it when you need it. There's some pros and cons to that. And then with the reactive setup there, the positive is that you use it when you need it, but it is something where I guess that's really that can be a pro and a con, right? The reactive ones. You could use it when you need it, but you could also use it when you don't necessarily need it. But I think the big thing is you can use it more when you need it versus the other way around there. And again, you can use them as often as you want, but it's just going to prolong the fat loss phase. So they're not really any downside to doing more of them. We can do as many as you want, but really the downside is you're not going to be losing body fat. Like it's just going to be a little bit slower to lose body fat at that point. So just a few things you need to know about them. There's no magic fat loss benefit. Again, it's more about the mental side of things. You might see like a very small increase in like if you were to have somebody who dieted straight through and then somebody who took some of these refeed days or diet breaks, their resting metabolic rate may be slightly higher at the end of the fat loss phase. Maybe there's been some research to show that, but it's just very minuscule that it doesn't even matter at the end of the day. Again, most of the main benefits are going to be more from the mental side of things versus any sort of like physiological benefit there. To me, it probably does help with lean body mass. More time out of a deficit should be better for lean body mass. Plus, days at maintenance calories or around them should help you push training, right? So more muscle / retention of muscle is going to be a better look as you lose weight. So I think it can be helpful from a lean body mass standpoint. It can help take stress off. Again, constantly eating low calorie is a stressor on the body, physically and mentally, and that stress can cause water retention. Plus, realizing you can eat a bit more makes it more likely you'll stick to it long term to actually see fat loss. And again, I see this more in women, and again, probably due to the stress response that some people will see when that women see to fat loss dieting there. Again, I think it can really be helpful from the mitigating stress standpoint. Again, we want to make sure it's not a free for all, right? But like I talked about, we still want to have a good base of foods on those days. And like I said, you can also use them really as often as you want to. Just understand that the more often you use them, the longer it's going to take for you to get to your fat loss goal. So that's the best way to implement a strategic refeed day and a deficit in there. So hopefully that's helpful. I like to think of them as a deload, very similar to deloading training. They're a deload of a fat loss phase. We talk about needing to have maybe weeks where we go a little bit lighter with training or backing off a little bit. Same kind of thing here with the deficit. All right, so next question is around aggressive fat loss dieting. Martin McDonald just came out with his aggressive dieting kind of blueprints. First, I think Martin's great. Martin's a really smart guy in this field. And I've just been getting a lot of questions around aggressive dietings now. He's a proponent of having kind of more of this aggressive approach, and I think it can definitely work. And so a client asked me, is there any magic to how he approaches it, or is it just that you can go super low calorie without really any real downside there? So I think this is a great question. So first, there really is no magic to it, right? To me, I don't think he necessarily does. I don't know the exact protocol, but again, there's not going to be any like magic that he's doing. It's just essentially he's saying that you could go faster with fat loss than you think. And I tend to agree. I think that at the end of the day, you probably people can go fairly quick with it, but there's some context that needs to be added to that. And so I want to go over my thoughts on fast versus slow weight loss, pros and cons of each, and which one may end up being better for you. So let's talk fast fat loss. We're talking 0.75% to 1.5% body weight loss per week. If you're under 50-pound person, that's about 1.1 to 2.2 pounds per week. And real quick, I just want to briefly bring up Dr. Bill Campbell did a study a couple years ago. I don't know if he ended up not publishing this or what happened with. I don't know if it was a preprint and it ended up not getting published. I can't remember what happened, but he did a study on some people, and it was, hey, how fast can we lose weight, or how large of a calorie deficit can we have, and people maintain their lean body mass. And he found that over a 2-week span, a 40% decrease in calories, 40% of your maintenance calories, 40% decrease from there. If your maintenance is 25, let's go with the easier approach here, 2,000, we're looking at, what would that be, like 1,200 calories. So that's what we're looking at here with that. And again, they obviously made sure they had enough protein, they resistance trained, and they found that in that 2-week time frame, they didn't lose any muscle. So that kind of gives you an idea of how fast you can go. So up to 40%, again, potentially maybe even higher, depending on your kind of current body fat percentage and everything. I'll go over that. But I think that's interesting because there has been a little bit of research done on that, just to give you an idea of fast versus slow there. So to me, that 40% is going to be around that 1 to 1.5% body weight loss per week. I like to go off percentages because it really tells us like how your body responds to that, and the deficit that you need to actually be at to sustain that, versus if we just come up with these calorie amounts, it is very dependent on the person tracking, how their body responds to being in a deficit. Whereas like the weight loss, kind of the 0.75 to 1.5% body weight loss per week, like that's a good number to go off of. Now, it is a little bit reactive, or yeah, it lags a little bit. So one of the things here with quick weight loss is how long you're doing it is super important. So that is the downside to potentially doing this. So having some data on yourself can be super important, but we know that, hey, you could probably cut at least 40% off, right? And that's probably going to get you within this 1 to 1.5% body weight loss per week if you can actually stick to that, right? Again, that's why I'm a fan of using that, because that really tells us what's actually going on, because there can be some tracking errors. So anyways, that's what I would consider fast fat loss, right? What are the pros of this approach? Would be quicker fat loss / results equals it's more motivating and better adherence / buy-in, which makes sense. And that's one of the points Martin makes is people say, hey, slow weight loss is better. And research shows that that can be demotivating for people to have that slower approach. So again, I totally agree with him there that I think the quicker fat loss is going to get more, it's going to be more motivating, and you're going to have that better adherence / buy-in long term, which in turn is going to lead to better like kind of weight loss maintenance and everything like that. It's going to be less time dieting. You wouldn't have to spend as much time because you're losing weight quicker, right? You're losing body fat quicker than someone who's going slower. It's a get in, get out approach there. And then to go off of what I just talked about, adding in more refeeds, and you can add in more refeeds and higher calorie days if needed by doing this approach. And that is part of Martin McDonald's approach, from my understanding, is that it's, hey, these aggressive kind of short fat loss diets, and then you have diet breaks / refeeds built in for a week or two. I don't know the exact time frame on that. Don't quote me on that, but that's my understanding. Is it's just, hey, we're going to go aggressive, and then we're going to have a week or two or longer where maybe we back off a little bit, get to your maintenance, and then we get aggressive again with that. So again, it allows us to really utilize those a bit more and really see the potential benefits of those. And if obviously you're listening to this now, you got to hear about refeeds in there. Some cons though of this faster approach, right? Because with anything, there's going to be some cons with it. Fewer calories equals higher muscle loss risk. Again, if we do things right, which I'll, at the end of this, I am going to tell you how to set this up and make sure that if you decide to go this route, how to do it. There is a risk of muscle loss, though, the quicker we go with fewer calories, right? Again, that's always going to be a risk. In some situations, though, that may not be top of mind or concern for you. There's going to be a higher risk of hunger and cravings. I know Martin says that he had some research to back up that there's actually less hunger and cravings with an aggressive approach. Again, maybe this is because of the refeeds. I'm not 100% sure. I would say it's very individual on this. To me, the lower your calories are, the higher the hunger is going to be. Now, again, what you do in that process is still going to be super important, but I think at the end of the day, that's going to be very individual for some people. There's going to be less flexibility, less calories to work with. So you're going to be less likely to adhere if anything pops up. Now, we could use refeed days to save us there, but again, there's going to be less flexibility on these days. You just need to be more strategic with your nutrition overall. We have to have things dialed in terms of your macros, your food choices, right? You just are going to have to be more strategic. You can't just eat whatever during that time. You're going to have to be smart and strategic with what you do with your nutrition. And you need to be all in during those times during the aggressive fat loss phase, right? Or the periods that you're fat loss dieting, which could be more mental stress potentially. So who are some people that I think are good avatars to do faster weight loss? Someone who's done multiple successful fat loss phases in the past, because again, you have an idea of what you need to do. You know where your calories need to be. Versus if you're someone who's yo dieted multiple times in the past, I personally don't think you'd be a great person to do this. You have a good base of nutrition habits or guidance with this, right? You have somebody guiding you, and or you have a good base of nutrition. I still think you should have a good base of nutrition no matter what, but having guidance during this time can be super helpful. You have a good relationship with diet and exercise. If you're someone who doesn't, I don't think these are going to be helpful for you. Next, you are not super lean. So if you're like sub 10% for men, sub 18%, 18 to 20% for women, I don't think you would be great to do this, right? I think the leaner you are, you're not going to be in a great position here for this. So I think everyone else, though, you're probably fine. If you're moderate levels of body fat, I think initially you're fine. But once you get leaner, I don't think it's a great idea. If you have higher body fat levels, I think you're fine. I think you could definitely do this. But because quicker fat loss can come with some risk, not everyone should take this approach, right? And also the last thing I want to say on quick fat loss is the quicker you lose weight, the shorter your fat loss diet needs to be. So the timing aspect of this is super important, right? So what that means is you could do a couple weeks, but anything longer than that, I don't think it's going to be great. And this is where you could strategically implement diet breaks and refeeds there to counteract that. But again, the amount of time that you're doing that needs to be shorter there. All right, so slow fat loss is going to be 0.25 to 0.75% of body weight loss per week. So for a 150-pound person, this is about 0.4 to 1.1 pounds lost per week. The pros of this approach is more flexibility, so potentially easier to adhere to, more managed hunger and cravings, which again, Martin would probably argue on that, but more calories to work with. To me, that would make sense that maybe your hunger and cravings aren't going to be as high. But again, I'm obviously open to hear something different there. Lower risk of muscle loss, potential to recomp. So that's a big thing here is the smaller the calorie deficit is, you do have this potential to recomp and add some muscle in that process. The larger the deficit gets, you can't. Now, in a fat loss phase, our main goal shouldn't be to add muscle, but if we can get away, if we want to do both, we can potentially go with the slower route there. And you can get away with not being quote unquote 100% adherent. Cons of this approach, though, is it's potentially less motivating and it's longer time to lose fat, which means a longer time in a deficit, which isn't always the greatest thing, right? So my takeaways here is most clients fall in that 0.5 to 1% of body weight loss per week. In my experience, 0.75% of body weight loss per week is a sweet spot for most. Don't get caught up in exact numbers here. I think that, we just don't want to get caught up in those exact numbers. It could be, you don't necessarily have to be exactly 0.75% of body weight loss per week, but that seems to be the sweet spot. And that's probably going to get us, I would say, somewhere around 500 calorie deficit essentially there with that. But no matter what, it's important that you do these things during fat loss dieting. We want to make sure we lift weights. We want to make sure we eat enough protein, right? So those are the two main things that are going to help us maintain lean body mass in this. So if you decide to go the aggressive fat loss route, make sure you have to do those things. We want to be smart with timing, meaning, we probably don't want to go extended periods of time without eating during the middle of the day. We want to time it around our workouts and finding a strategy that mitigates hunger for you. We still want to get a good base of nutrient dense / whole food. So again, we want to try to make sure that we're getting that base filled there with that. And we want to make sure sleep and stress are managed there with that. Lastly, remember scale weight is just one metric. We also want to track progress pics, measurements, and how clothes are fitting in that process as well too. So, again, there's pros and cons to each. And so you need to figure out what is going to work best for you there with that. So hopefully that answers that. And then we have one more question around, what do you do if you can't progress on the next weight? It's too heavy. Do I maintain the same weight and reps? So I think this is a great question. I think this is going to really depend on what exercise this is, because you could just do more reps. Like that's a way to progress for a while. You could do that, or you could increase weight. And if your reps drop a little bit, that's okay. Then you just work your way back up the reps, right? So that's how I would go about it. Or you can maintain for a little bit and just practice technique and work on that. So there's the options are limited, basically not limitless, or unlimited. But there's not one right way that you have to do this. Again, I think the exercise you choose is going to impact this as well too, right? Are we talking a leg press, or are we talking a dumbbell lateral raise? A dumbbell lateral raise, maybe we just need to increase reps for a little bit while longer on that, or maybe we just need to match longer. Whereas like a leg press, maybe we need to be a little bit more aggressive with adding some weight and whatnot there, right? Because it uses more. It's just going to be easier to add weight to a leg press than a lateral raise. And so what I do here with this, so clients, I have them train in a rep range, and we use reps in reserve. So just take, for example, 8 to 12 reps at, let's say, 1 RR. You do a weight. Again, at this point, let's say once they get to 1 RR, they should have a general idea of what's challenging in that rep range. So we want to find a weight that's challenging within that rep range. Let's say you get to 12 now, it's 8 to 12. And we're doing dumbbell lateral raises here, but you go up to the next one, it's just too heavy. There, it's okay to add some reps, even if you go over the rep range, so long as that target RAR is being met, that intensity is there. And you do that for a couple weeks, and then maybe now you're ready to go to the next weight, and it's okay to go from 12 to 13 reps, add 5 pounds or 2.5 pounds, and now you're at the low end of the rep range. You're maybe closer to 8 reps, and then you work your way back up. I think too many times people feel like they need to match reps and weight. So if they add weight, they need to make sure the reps are the same. That's not always the case. It's okay to have your reps drop for a couple of weeks, and then you work your way back up there with that. So again, that's how I would go about that. And again, we're talking specifically for muscle growth here there. So let me know if you have any questions on that. That's it for this episode. If you found this podcast to be helpful in any way, if you could leave a rating and review, and that will help more people find this podcast. And appreciate everybody who listens to this. If you haven't yet, give me a follow on Instagram, Jeff, HOEHN_. That's our most active on social media. So if you have any questions around the podcast or anything like that, that's the best place to reach out. And then lastly, if you need help implementing refeed days, if you need help figuring out what approach is best for you, then my free 30-minute strategy calls for you. We can help map out a game plan for you and get you heading in the right direction there. The link to that is in the show notes. So that's it for this episode. I'll chat with you guys next time.